What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 111 of the Lombard Trucking Show. Thank you all for being here once again. I know it's been a little while. I want to appreciate all the feedback I got from the previous episode with Carrie Jablonski. And I know everybody was wondering where I was necessarily recording from, and I was in the closet at the studio at Orange Theory, not in the closet you're thinking of. Don't worry. Relax on that. But you got to get it in where you can do it. That's straight out of David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me right there when it comes to finding time. And when it comes to fitness over the road, that's what I have to do. And that's what drivers have to do. You have to find the time where you can get it. And so when it comes to putting the show out there, having these conversations, having the difficult conversations, you got to get it in where you can get it. I have a lot more to come in some episodes to come. Just want to give a little bit of a preview. A couple weeks ago, a friend of mine, we headed down to the trucker convoy slash meetup. There was a peaceful gathering in Eagle Pass, and there's some things I want to say about that. I know on Twitter we had a lot going on between, good friend of the show, Gord McGill, going on Tucker Carlson, talking about the Canadian Freedom Convoy and the ramifications on Twitter of the alleged psyop that a woman thought. So there's just a lot of stuff I want to share on it and a lot of good things to come. But the reason for tonight's episode, which I'm really excited for, is basically how I came across this is just too funny because it's the primaries here in Texas, and Texas has early voting. And I've been wondering what ballot do I pick for? Because Texas, unlike other states, is a little bit different. You don't necessarily join a party, so to speak. In Connecticut, when you register to vote, you can pick a party: Republican, Democrat, Independent, and then you're only allowed to vote in that party's primary. But in Texas, essentially, anytime there's a primary, you have to pick one or the other, the GOP or the Democratic primary ballot, and then for that year, you're locked in. So if you vote in the Democratic primary, if there is a runoff, you're only able to vote in that primary. And part of me was like, you know what? I'm going to protest vote against the current president. I know Marianne Williamson's running for president as a Democrat. I was like, maybe I'll protest vote because the current president is just, just go online, just go on the internet and take a look. But then all of a sudden I was looking at the ballot. I was like, no, because as you know, I've been critical of my current representative, Greg Kassar. I've reached out to his office many times. This guy's a hard guy to get a hold of. And, I get it. These people are busy, but he's not busy enough to go get clout on Instagram. He's not busy enough to go walk in these picket lines for photo ops and to do all this other stuff. He's a big virtue signaler, in my opinion. So nobody's running against him as the incumbent. Probably something maybe I should have done. But I'm getting a little long stretch here. I was looking at some candidates, and I came across one. The gentleman who's joining the show today. He's a Marine veteran. He works in supply chain, military logistics. Has gone to school. He has certifications on it. He's running in the Republican as a Republican to become the nominee for the Texas 35th Congressional District. And I have the pleasure of welcoming on the show today for an awesome conversation. So without any further delay, I want to bring him up onto the stage. Mr. Michael Rodriguez, how you doing?
Hello, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And, I said, I love talking supplies, love talking about logistics. I love just, figuring out the issues, figuring out problems. And this is the best place to find it out is in the supply chain realm here.
You couldn't have said, and just so that any listeners know, we talked for briefly beforehand, but you couldn't have said a better quote to kind of walk onto the show, because one of the biggest things that we do, we just had a guest, my previous guest, she's the CEO of Trucker Tools, which is a very great load board app that's has use for owner operators and brokerages and beyond. And we've had other guests on the show, Evan Shelley of Truck Parking Club. And the main theme of this show is to solve problems. That's what we do. And that's what's awesome about people who work in this industry is their desire to solve problems, not make them. Some people end up making them by accident, but so great. Yeah. Great way to get on here. And I do just want to preface before we get into our conversation, I always talk about this in especially since the toxicity of the previous elections between 2016 and 2020, people kind of, at this point in our society, they're always, people are essentially they identify you with who you voted for in the last
Mhm.
election. And I almost want to go back to the time, and my wife and I talked about this. We need to go back to the era of when people didn't discuss who they voted for. But I do want to just say before he got on that I did go to the polls and I did vote for you out of for I think the reasons why people need to vote, and it's based off of yeah, their policies matter, but character matter too. And just the first thing you said coming on here is you want to solve problems. So, that's part of the reason why you're on here. That's part of the reason why my vote can easily go that direction.
Well, thank you,
But
thank you.
yes, absolutely. But let's get right into it, man.
Sure.
What's your story? Where are you from? And how did we get here?
So I'm from here. I'm from the San Antonio area. Originally, my parents were both born and raised here in San Antonio, down on the west side here in San Antonio, near downtown. Like I always say, my grandparents set up their roots here in San Antonio. My parents were both born and raised here. And then my dad himself joined the military. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he made a career out of the army himself. That's when he had myself and my brother and my sister. And San Antonio has always been our home. This has always been the place that we came to. This is where we set up our roots. When my dad retired from the military, this is where we came back home, and we ever since then we just been settled in between right here down in the San Antonio area. So technically we don't live in San Antonio, but we live in the Bexar County area. We're just right outside the city limits, just the way it was drawn out for us. And I've been here ever since I was in fourth grade. Yeah.
What's crazy about San Antonio in Texas cities in general is how big they are, because technically, like, I live in Buda, and when people from out of the area ask me, I still just will say Austin because it's kind of Austin South. But when I was trucking, I mean, I've been, and I'm glad you said that, by the way. You said it's Bexar County,
Yes.
but it's spelled Bexar, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that gets confusing a lot to some people. But I've been down to Converse and trying to think of some of the other towns, Shirts,
Yeah. Converse,
uh,
Universal
all,
City.
yeah, all those towns. It's
Mhm.
really just you can if you went between any of those towns in San Antonio, you wouldn't think you ever left
Yes.
because of how big it is. But for the rest of it, but San Antonio is pretty huge. So you've always been down in San Antonio. So you went to high school? Where'd you wind up?
Went to high school right here to Converse Jutsons, where I went to high school. I've always been involved. I played football there. I was fortunate enough to be part of the state championship team when I played here in high school. And I moved on and decided, I wanted to go to college and further my education, try to find a career path. I was kind of like out of high school. I didn't really know kind of what to do, like most high schoolers, but the opportunity was there. So the opportunity is always there. I had to find the opportunity. And in the midst of looking for the opportunity, I decided, like, halfway through college, not halfway, but in the beginning of the college, I was like, you know what? I need to get my head straight. I need to figure out what I want to do. So then I joined the military. And that's when I joined the Marine Corps. Had my great time in the Marine Corps. I learned a lot of things, did a lot of things, and seen a good part of the world. When I was in the military, that I went during peacetime, and of course, unfortunately, we transitioned over into a wartime situation. And then I was stop loss in the military or into the Marine Corps. Once I was done with stop loss, back then it was like, all right, we're done. The war's over. Let's go home and relax, celebrate. So I got out of the Marine Corps and I went to school. I went to college here down the street over there by Texas State University in San Marcos. I went to school there, graduated. Then I was like, you know what? The war's still going on. I didn't want to just sit on the sidelines just yet from that. So then I made that choice to join back into the military. However, this time, instead of going to back in the Marine Corps, it was then that time it was more appropriate, or it just made more sense for me to go to the Army because of the transition time it would have taken to get into the Army versus getting into the Marine Corps. And during that time, my wife was pregnant, and we were about to have our second child in our family. So I was like, you know what, I want to go back into the Army, or I want to go to the Army. I want to make a difference, and I went and I joined the Army.
Did
And
you
then
go
from
in as an
there,
officer?
no, I went as enlisted. I was like, I wanted to be on the ground. I'm I'm kind of like in the trench kind of person, and I know previously being in the Marine Corps, and I was a rifleman there in the Marine Corps too, and I know being in there, like career as an officer is different than a career as an enlisted. And as an enlisted man, I knew if the path that I was going to choose, it was going to put me right where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be up into the front of it, into the thick of it. And so that's why I chose going enlisted and going in as an infantryman, because as an officer, you get to choose to a certain point, but your career is pretty much set for you. They're gonna put you where they need you as an officer, but as enlisted, I was gonna stay on the ground because that's where I wanted to be. So that's what I did, and I did that for about 11 years active duty in the Army. And then it was because when I was in the Army, it was deployed, deployed, deployed. I deployed like every odd year. I was deploying, and I was like, I wanted to spend a little bit more time with my family because they were growing up before me, and every time I came back, they were always bigger and smarter. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna settle down, but I still want to serve. I'm gonna go into the National Guard. So I joined our Texas National Guard here in Texas, and then I spent some time there, and then we got the pandemic issue, and then I wound up serving alongside that in the pandemic. For the first time was for testing, and the second time was for the vaccination push that they did. And then in 22, I had enough time to where I could retire. So then I chose that route. So in May of 22 is when I hung up the boots and cinched in and played pay attention more into my family role here. So because we still have a young one, we still have a little 7-year-old in our family. So I got kids ages 21 to 16 to 7. So I got them. They're pretty spread out. So, but
No, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's what I love to do.
And what a career that is too, starting out. And I have a couple friends who have gone from the Marines and are in the Army. I think I have a friend who's at a guy I deployed with who's at Fort Hood right now. Now that I think about it, he might still be there. But I'll tell you, it is it's funny you put it that way of not going, because I always tell people, if you got the degree, you should definitely go in as an officer. And there was a kid when I went to boot camp who did have his degree and he joined and enlisted. And our drill instructors, like, they busted his balls. They're like, "What are you doing not getting that paycheck?" They like, because at the end of the day, military is a job, but it says a lot about your character, again, knowing you wanted to go into the Army, because really you could have gone in the Army as an officer and probably still gotten into, gotten into seen combat, but eventually, that route can end. At some point, once you become an 03 or higher, really that risk kind of runs a little bit lower after X amount of years. But then also, and this is just good advice for anybody who is still in the military, is continuing to serve after you get out. Probably one of my biggest regrets was not looking at more of that information, of either staying in the Marine Reserve or looking at the National Guard, especially because of look what you just did. I mean, you've gotten yourself to a point to where you're still young enough to be, getting retirement, being able to hang it up. But that's it's interesting. So with the Texas National Guard, go into that, because this is where some of the logistics stuff started playing. This is where you started getting into the logistics realm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it started towards the end of my Army active duty realm, when I was managing our arms room and our supply, or our NBC room. I had to take care of all the maintenance, and then I was also the movement officer, the unit move officer for our unit. So I did a couple of deployments where I had to do all the paperwork and make sure that all our equipment was where it needed to be. And when we did our trip to Europe for Atlantic Resolve, I was actually the guy that got to get on the train and follow the equipment from Germany all the way into Georgia. So I got to see the countryside all the way from Europe, and I got to experience all that, what plays into the transportation mode for our equipment to move all the way across. And then on the way back, I always like to say I was single-handedly the one that held up our entire movement, because I didn't want to sign off on papers, because someone had made a mistake on how the transportation was going to be made. They were going to send our equipment in 2 separate trains, and we didn't have the personnel to to go on two separate trains. And I was like, nope. I was like, I'm not going to sign off on this. I didn't make the mistake, but it was my responsibility. So I took the responsibility to say that I'm not signing off on this because all our equipment needs to move in one movement and we're all going to be on it together. So they got mad at me, but at the end, we got what we needed. We got the trains to go in the same movement as one instead of two separate ones, which is what they wanted. But I refused to sign off on the paperwork to let that go. So I got a little praise from that because they literally want to send our train off in the countryside unguarded and unattended, all the way from Bulgaria into Germany. And I was like, nope, not while I'm here. So yeah, it was a great time. And then of course during the pandemic, I got put in charge again because I actually volunteered this time. I was like, hey, look, I have some experience in the supply chain world. I know like how the ins and outs work for the most part. And I was like, give me the responsibility. And so they gave me the responsibility and I got to, coordinate all the transportation and all the supplies that we got to have in it, along with the specimens that we collected to send off. We had to, get all that transport out too. So, I got to get, be involved with that. So I was really happy with that.
Yeah, with the COVID rollout or I guess the COVID procedures going on in Texas at the time, you're talking about the transportation when you say specimens, is that like for the testing, like for
Yes.
people getting tested?
Yes. Like we had like all the samples that we took, they had to be, they were timed. So we had a certain time that we had to, collect it, keep them cooled. And because the temperature had to be a certain temperature and they had to be, transferred. We had the transfer of custody from one entity to another before it lifted the responsibilities off of us. So everything was it was moving back then.
Yeah. So and how did those specimens move? Did they move by like tractor trailer, or were these like Sprinter vans?
So they
Box?
were transported. No, they were transported by air.
Oh,
Yeah, we passed them off to someone who would transport them, and then they would get to, once they left us, we knew that they went with someone and they went directly to a mode of transport, to either to another cooler until it was able to transport like a more high energy, more efficient cooler to hold until it was ready to be transported. But they eventually at that time were just being flown out to where it needed to go to be tested. So they're leaving by air.
nice. And so when it came to the vaccine rollout, now how did the shipping and receiving of that, were you at testing sites or hospitals? Those came by truck. At least I
Yeah.
thought that's what I had remembered
So
seeing.
yeah, we had testing sites and we had pickups. They would have them in the freezers, and then we'd had to go pick them up and put them. And we had our own little portable freezers that we had. So we either had dry ice. We always had to have something, coolers to keep the vaccines in, and of course we had to maintain them on our end too at certain temperatures. So we used whatever we needed, we took, and whatever we didn't, we kept stored in our little hubs that we maintained at the time. But yeah, everything was tracked then too. We had to track by lot numbers and all the other fun stuff. I mean, like I said, I really enjoyed it, and it was great. It was a great learning experience, and especially as like how quickly it went up, and like how we had to like maintain the maintain the inventory on it, not just the vaccines themselves, but all the other supplies that we needed to go along with it, because they had kits that we had, because they had to be injected with needles. So then we had to make sure we had the right gauges and all, and we had to make sure we had the that they were actually within the safe, uh, how's that word? It was in the protocols that it was needed to be in. So and then on top of that, we had to make sure we had the gloves and the mask and everything else. There was like so much that we had to maintain at that time. So
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say, only because now the response to the pandemic, obviously, some people are critical to how it was early on with this incessant need for ventilators and stuff. But when it comes to your effort with at least testing and the vaccine rollout, would you say that it was an overall success? Do you think it kind of went well? Could things have gone better in any way, or
oh
was
yeah,
there anyone
no,
like was anybody
absolutely.
lacking?
So like from my perspective, the way I saw it happen, because I was on the ground effort of it, and like in the beginning it was the testing. So the only thing was that was really confusing, especially for the public too, is like, what happens if I'm positive? And like we didn't have an answer because like, oh well, it's basically like all you could say is like, well, now you're positive, because we didn't have a treatment plan, or we didn't have anything like, you go here, or this is how take these measurements, and or follow the CDC guidelines. That's basically the only thing we could tell them. But that was one of the things, is like, a lot of people just wanted to know, like, how what do I do if I'm positive? And so, I mean, we couldn't really tell them like, this is how you treat yourself. We just had to say, well, you just have to follow the CDC guidelines. So that was with testing. With vaccines, of course, it was pretty straightforward. People come in, they get their vaccines. We get their information, that we had to input their information into the system, so that way they're in a system saying that they received their vaccine. They got their vaccine cards to prove that their vaccine was administered at this time, and then it was like dated like when you come back and get your second vaccine.
Well,
So
it's
it
good.
was.
Yeah, it's good that there was no like snag. It seemed that it went out flawless. Just for the future, and if anything, it was a great learning experience to where if something, if something happens again, at least that there's experienced people who kind of have the information and know how it goes. Now, so from there, so 2022, you hang it up in 2022 is really not that long ago when you think about it. So you recently retired. What was the pivot from there? So you get up the, you hang up, hang up the tags, you hang up the boots. You're, you want to be around your family more.
Mhm.
What's your pivot from there? Because we're talking now, and you're running for Congress. So how do we get from retiring? Hey, I'm going to be a family guy. What was the gap between then and now? Basically, the past 2 years.
So like, yeah, the past 2 years, I settled in with the family. I got my honeydew list, and I was like, just working around the house, clean, keeping it straight, keeping it neat, uh, doing the dropping the kids off at school, picking them up from the bus stop, just like having a good time. And the reasons why I'm running for Congress is basically because of our current incumbent. I don't feel he has the the desire to actually serve like the United States or the people. He speaks of an agenda, and when I hear an agenda, I know I hear an agenda, because it doesn't include everyone. It's kind of exclusive more than inclusive for people, and he just does not have he, he does not have the ability, in my opinion, to have the responsibility of our people and our country in his hands. And we shouldn't allow him to even have the platform to even say what he's saying currently. So, and I think, to come out there, someone really needs to come up there and challenge him, and give him a good challenge. I don't think he was not challenged in those last election. He basically I want to say he had a walk through there too, and he really needs to have a person on that will challenge him, and you compare them side by side, and know that, okay, which one of us, or which one of the two that are there will be best for our district, best for our state, and best for our country. And from when I'm just thinking as a voter, if I didn't know me, I would just say that, well, this guy has a lot more experience than this guy, even though he's been in Congress once for one term. He still does not have the ability or the experience to even know exactly everything that he's talking about or needs to be talking about. I mean, I've been to plenty of places around the world, and I've interacted with many different cultures, and then interacted with different militaries at that too. And from being on the inside of the military too, I've seen the inner workings, not just in one branch, but like two different branches, and our National Guard. Most people don't. Most people that served, and I can say this because I served, because I didn't know anything about the National Guard when I was active duty for the Marine Corps or the Army. It is different, and it is something different to understand, and something different to navigate with. And it's just kind of like when you have the ability to implement strategy, It's how are you going to implement strategy? You have to know your capabilities. And that's how I feel. I don't feel he understands that the full capabilities of what is out there in our government to be in the position he's in.
No, that's good. I like that. I like that. What motivated you is is your competition. Like you took a look at who your representative was, and you're saying, I don't think he's representing me, my peers, my family, and that's what set you apart. And you mentioned about how he specifically has an agenda, whereas you haven't said anything about an agenda yet. We've been talking for almost a half hour. There's really no there's no agenda there, but it was you don't think he's and the job of a house of a representative, which I was saying at the top of the show, his job, and I looked this up because when Chip Roy was my congressman, I made a video about how I made a video where I was talking about the duties of a representative as it's listed in the Constitution, and where those job duties are listed and what they're supposed to do. And the first thing is listen to constituents. And made this, and because Chip Roy was somebody I was trying to get a hold of, and he was another guy who's very hard to get a hold of, and from Maryland, so to speak. And I don't really, I'm not really sure I trust his character too much. Although, and I'm not looking to, and he could be, somebody who could be a friend of yours. So I don't want to step on anything. But when it comes to Greg Casar, this is what motivated you to go against him. I'm kind of wanting. So what was like, and I asked a previous guest of the show who had ran for office, what was like the one day? What did that first day look like where you're like, that's it? I got to do this. Like, was there one specific day, or did you like kind of make a plan?
No, I can definitely honestly say I didn't have a plan. It was definitely like this is actually my second time running for this position. So the first time back in 2021 is December 21. I was sitting there and I was watching the news. I was folding clothes, and then they were talking about the election and how it is the last day. And I was like, I'm serious. I was like most people. I didn't pay no mind because I like to believe I have confidence in our government and that the people that are there that they'll do what's right. So I was like folding clothes and I was listening. They said last day to put your name on the ballot, and I was like, you know what? Who's running? I was like, and so I was like, let me look this up. So I looked it up real quick, and I looked it up both parties, and then I quickly ran through the names, just like snapshots of them, and of what they're running for. And then I came across Kassar, and I was just like former city council, and I was like of Austin, and I was like, okay. And then I came upon some things about how he was on the city council in Austin, and I was like, he was the reason why the homeless were just all encamped it, because I was in Austin at one time during the COVID mission, and there were tents lined up on the street, and literally no one was in them. There were just tents there, and people all over the place. I was like, he's the one. And then I read into it again. He's the one that wanted to defund the police. And I was like, yeah, this guy, I don't think he has he doesn't have the right mindset for what's needed for us at a national level. And we can't give him a platform at the national level if he did this to Austin, if he did this to his city, and what's he going to plan to do for our nation? And so I was like, no, I have to be in there, and I have to at least put my name in there and give it a shot, and hopefully I would come through. And fortunately, there were 10 names on the Republican ballot. I was one of 10 names on there, and then in that election, I actually made it into the runoff. So I was like, honestly, it was quite a shock, and I was like, wow, that's good for me. And I was like, all right, let's push this and let's move forward, and so we can get face off against Kassar. And that was always my whole point. Is if I felt that he did not have what is necessary for a federal level, because that's how I view government. I view government at its level and its purpose. And I don't look at it as an accession to, career progression. Like So like the federal government has a responsibility and has a job to oversee, and that's what I'm shooting for. Now, if I felt that I would have a better fit at a state government, I would go for that, or even local government, I would shoot for that. But I felt my strength is more at the federal level, at the federal level, due to my experience that I've had in the military and that I've had across the world, and the education that I've taken, that I chose to pursue during my education time, because I have a bachelor's in international studies and a minor in business, and then of course I pursued a supply chain management certificate, and I was on the way to pursue a master's in business to find that position in supply chain, but the pandemic kind of set that aside for a while, and then I just kind of stayed with the work efforts and the guard, and then now I'm pursuing this because this is another level in my life that I feel that I'll be beneficial for the state, for our district, and the country. So I just want to offer the opportunity, for myself and for my family and for the people of 35.
No, I'm really with you on that. I'm glad you brought up some of those important issues. No, number one, it is true when it comes to just overall experience in people in the political world. Yeah, he's has his entire career has been in nothing but politics, being city council and now a congressman. He's never served in the military. He's never really had a real, essentially, he's never had to work in the real world, so to speak. And I mean, in my honest opinion of him, I believe he's a communist. It's really not hard to say that. And where it might seem like quite an accusation, I'm not sure if it's one he'd deny. But I really want to touch on that homeless situation too, because it's really important, because this is an issue because when we're talking federal level, his and what he stands for, him getting the camping ban lifted created an absolute chaos in the city of Austin. And what it did is it brought in people. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't it didn't help it didn't help homeless people. That's the thing. It was just you lifted the camping ban, and then there was nothing else ever done ever to try to help these people, and it became horrible. There were horrible women were being chased. There was people free. I've seen people freebasing heroin in broad daylight right on Cesar Chavez. And then the city, and when you talk about representation, the city of Austin voted overwhelmingly majority, over 2/3, to reinstate that camping ban, something that he fought tooth and nail to lift, because he didn't lift it to help the homeless. He lifted it off this precipice that it shouldn't be illegal to be
Mm-hmm.
homeless. And in theory, and yes, like in theory, yes, but also when it comes to the city of Austin or cities in general, if you're going to live in a city or live in a town or community, those people do pay taxes. Those businesses pay taxes. They pay to be there. And if you're not actively contributing to that, then you don't. And I'm sorry, we're going back thousands of years. If you're not contributing to your society, you'll be outcasted. If you want to be homeless, let me tell you, there's plenty of land in West Texas. You can just go live out in the middle and you can do whatever you want. But so I just really need to make that a point. And this has nothing to do. I think that there's a way to solve the homeless issue. San Antonio is doing a good job with something like Haven for Hope, which I've heard a
Mm-hmm.
lot about, which I think is something that would really help save lives in the homeless aspects of things. It includes housing them and getting them sober and finding them employment. I don't think just letting that free reign happen. But that right there, you couldn't have worded it better. Just in sheer experience alone, your experience is with the federal government. You worked for the federal, you within the Army and the Marine Corps, dealing with global supply chains. I mean, I have a lot of friends who listen to the show who work for JB Hunt, and they work in intermodal, deal with trains. Your experience is very invaluable when it comes to building relationships, making sure people across Europe are and things are going right. Being down there on the ground, administering, helping with the vaccine rollout. This is real time experience compared to a stint on city council and then
Mm-hmm.
getting some Instagram clout to basically win an easy election. So I'm glad that was it. So let's go into your campaign. Kind of what who are you running against? What sets you apart from these guys? And because and like I said, I know listeners of my show might say I'm being biased or whatever, but I mean it is my show at the end of the day. But in reality, If I'm just speaking personally, when it comes to who I see running against Greg Kassar and who I saw out of the list of candidates, and I know the type of residents that live in the 35th district, I think when and I hate to sit and, like I said, feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but there's a lot, your name's Michael Rodriguez. There's a lot of your demographic who live here who
Mm-hmm.
you can represent, who I think it would be powerful for this district. And that's a factor. And compared to the rest of your competition, I don't know if really they hold that same representation that you carry with them.
No, absolutely. I try to stay away from my identity politics of the issue, but the reality is it does exist, and it does play into some decision making.
Yeah, I hate it too. Trust me.
Yeah, no, believe me, I hate it too. I honestly believe the best person that is willing to step in and represent, and not just the qualifications, but just like diverse experience. Because people say that too, like, what is your qualifications to run for Congress? And I was like, well, it's a diverse experience. Congress is the House of the people, so we got to bring in a diverse mind thinking for the people. Because I like to use the example. Well, what happens when you get a bunch of engineers together? They think like engineers. They're going to design like engineers. And I say that as a thing from being in the military. Some of the equipment we get, we're like, who designed this? This doesn't work for us. It's like, well, it was designed by a bunch of engineers, and they didn't bring that knowledge of somebody that's actually may have to use it into the thought process when they're doing the design of it. So, and then that's kind of like what I like to bring. I have many years of just working in different areas in the military. In the military, like, you really don't get to choose who you work with. You find a way to work with them. And the same thing goes like when you're dealing with foreign governments. So, and as far as the other guys and the that are running for 35, I try to think, and I look at them and I think objectively as a voter. Like, how does a voter view them? And you view them kind of like the same way that I did. It's like, they have great intentions, but sometimes, great intentions is not always what's best for us. And I know some of them probably decided to run because they felt that no one was running, or and not just in this race, but in some other races, when there's a seat that it's very leaning one side than the other, there are people just going to throw their name in the hat just to try to get a name out there and try to promote themselves in one way or another. I can't say that for sure in this race in the primary, but it does happen. And I looked at the other guys too before I put my name into the back into the hat, but I had already planned on doing that. And I always like to wait till to see who's there, because if somebody's there and I felt that they're it, like they have a chance, I wouldn't have came in, because the ultimate goal is to get Kassar out of office. And I feel that I'm the one that has that chance. A guy that's grown up in this area, grown up in the district, up and down. I can name my childhood up till current of where I've been in the district. And Kassar, and my strong understanding is, he does not even live in the district that he's supposed to represent. So, and that's a big thing for me too. I mean, if you're going to represent your district in Congress, you better be from that district, and not like, oh, if I win, I'm going to move in or anything like that. But have some, have that connection that with the district that you're running for, because it's Congress is the only office that you do not have to live in the district to run for it. And the way I see it is, that's like saying that out of the entire district, you're going to tell me there's not one person that has the substance to run for his own district. And it's like, well, that's how I feel. It's like, I feel I have the substance. I feel I have that, what it needs to represent, across the district, for the district, the state, and the nation. Because there's a lot of responsibility in the federal government, and at least somebody that has some knowledge in it should be in it.
I think that's wild that I had no idea that you can technically not live in a district and
Mhm.
run for office in that district, that to me just sounds like, I don't know, that's like unreal.
Yeah.
Like, because how can you represent people you're not even associated with? Like, you don't go to their churches, you don't go to
Mhm.
their grocery store,
Yep.
you didn't work at a business there. Like, yeah, you're not working at a business that's in that district. You don't own, you don't even own a bit. I could see if you
Mhm.
own the business in the district, maybe you live a little bit outside of it, but so you spend the majority of your time there. Maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but yeah, the idea of not living there already is one. But but yeah, you said you're the guy for the job. Kind of now, say, what's your platform? What are the biggest things you're going for to represent what are you going to bring to the people of the 35th? What's your platform? What are you hoping to go to DC and do for us down here in the 35th?
Well, first thing I want to do is, take care of the business at hand, and not afraid to be that voice that, steps in and says that what is right and what has to be done, what needs to be done to get everything moving. I mean, first most important thing right now is currently our budget. Like, we can't get a budget going. It's like appropriations is like holding everything up, and we keep pushing it down the road, kicking the can down the road, as they say. But no, I feel that I would not be afraid. I'd make it into Congress. I would not have any issues going against anyone in there, because the way I see it, because 35 is the way it is, and it doesn't gain that traction from the party that some of the other races around the state are getting. Like, I have no strings. I have no one to hold me back, and which I love, because the least strings that I have, the more vocal I can be, and the more direct I can be. And because when I'm direct, I'm not being direct because I just want to be heard. I'm being direct because it's right. And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, and tell me how we can fix it. Don't just, try to shout me out because you don't agree with what I'm saying. And that's kind of like what I'm hoping for. So as far as, like I said, with the traction, I'm not going to have any strings as for like the party, or any strings from any corporation, because I'm not going to have their agenda on my plate. I'm going to have the district's agenda that I get to move forward with, and actually point out and what's going to be best that serves us as a district and a nation. So not just I'm going along party lines, or I'm going along corporate lines or anything. It's straight for the people of this district.
So budget's like the first thing on your mind, is that which I'm actually that's actually might be one of the most calming things I've ever heard, because a lot of people who are running for office, when you see their commercials, they're pointing at, the culture wars are always on the top of the list. There's always all these other, a myriad of other certain issues, but really, like, the biggest elephant of the room, because we could talk about the culture wars, we could talk
Mhm.
about Israel, Ukraine, we could talk about that until the cows come home, but at the end of the day, there's rent that's due, there's
Yep.
bills that need to be paid, and if we're talking about, and we're talking about, because China's involved in this conversation too, and the dollar is still the world reserve currency currently, but if that can gets kicked and the status quo continues with what the budget and the deficit looks like, I mean, we're not like, forget Ukraine or
Yeah.
Israel and forget anything, the things that we want to quote unquote support or not support. If the money's not right, if the balance sheet's not where
Yeah.
it needs to be, then then where are we going in the first place?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's many things that we can talk about. There's many things that we can move up to the top of any kind of, priority list. But when it comes down to the biggest role of Congress is to maintain that budget, is the purse, to hold the purse of the nation. And as Congress, we cannot just go off and just keep extending our debt, because it's not Congress's debt, it's the people's debt. It is our debt. Like, we are paying that, and like we see it right now when we go to the gas or we go to the grocery store. I was looking the other day, and I was just like, I never knew that thing went up $3. It's just like, it just kind of happens overnight, and it's just everything is going higher and higher, because we know as consumers A business is not going to take a hit. The business is not going to take the cut. They're going to pass that cost to us, the consumers. So the business itself is going to maintain its profits because that's the the philosophy of a business is to make profit. So they're going to make their profit and we're going to pay for it because we need to consume. And if Congress can't even get themselves under control to even control this thing like a budget, to just say, okay, we don't have that much money this year to fund this. So we either need to make some choices or make some cuts along the way. But we're not running a business as government. We're just providing a service for the people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is crazy to think of the people who are in Congress who have run businesses and essentially they know what it took for their business to succeed, and yet they're in these positions of power and they're not doing it. I always find that kind of funny. So budget number, is like first and foremost, like taking that on. What are, what are some of the other selling points to any of the voters out there if they're looking to go to the primary or they're looking to vote? What else can they count on from you?
Well, I will mention the other elephant, the border. Everybody knows the border, and that's I try not to. I mean, we know that is the issue that needs to be fixed, and we know that our current administration right now could just easily fix it by just implementing what was there before they released it and took it off the cards. But I mean, there's a lot more that I think I can bring, even as far as like bringing in towards the military and like how we can move forward on the military. Because my time in the military, this is what I saw. I saw a lot of wasteful spending, and that's just from me seeing there. We went through uniform changes like no other. I don't know if you saw it in your time in the Marine Corps. I think by then they've already decided on their pattern, which was good. And I like to bring up the fact because the Marine Corps did it in a way that, okay, we're gonna roll out a new pattern. We're gonna roll out some prototypes, but we're not giving it to everybody. We're not going to decide it until we actually figure out this is what we want to do. So I was there in the Marine Corps when they started the whole change in the uniforms. And did you know that the original uniform was Velcro sleeves? They wanted to have it to where they took the sleeves off. And it was detachable sleeves. And then I remember the sergeant major of the division that time came over and showed us. He was all excited and everything. And we were just like, no, that
Oh
does
man,
not.
that's
That is a
like
bad idea.
that sounds like the corniest, probably the corniest thing I ever heard. Yeah, but I do have staff and COs who were around when the old tricolor turned into digital camouflage, and
Mhm.
and even, I mean, they talk about actually on the show Generation Kill, where some guys had the newer uniforms, and they
Yeah.
show that really accurately, where some guys have digital, some guys have Marpat. And yeah, I mean, I saw that same type of, I remember looking at the inventory list of an artillery battery and the costs of the computers, the wires, the cords,
Oh
and
yeah.
then even at the supply house, like the cost of a 2-man tent was like hundreds of dollars, and it's like you can get the same thing at Walmart for a Coleman 2-man tent for $25,
Mhm.
and it's like to see that spending is like unreal.
Yeah, and then I mean it goes into more than that because like you were supposed to like replace computers like every 4 years and all, and then and same with furniture. There's a budget for all that, but it doesn't happen because we have to keep pushing our budget because the way we're spending our funds that we have right now. The army, I saw that they went through so many uniform changes. They went from that universal pattern back now to the multicam pattern and to the current pattern they have now. And then it's not just the uniforms that they change all the equipment along with it. So that includes the rucksacks and all the other, equipments that go along to supplement, to complement those to the uniform. And then that was just, to me, that was like a huge waste of funding that money could have been spent in other areas of our military. So I mean, I see that, and I also see like, like how we treat or how we can serve our veterans. I mean, I look into that. I'm very involved. Being a veteran myself, I like to think that when it's my time to where I need to be, looking for these resources that they'll be available for me. and they'll be, because we served and we did what we had to do for our country, and we did what they asked for us. May not always agreed with it, but we did it, and we served into that capacity. And and as far as like, I think one thing different that I would like to do that I've not heard is to like kind of lower that retirement age more for those who serve in the reserves, because they don't collect their retirement until like they're well into their 60s. So, I mean, that's one thing I would try to like push for. We they served, and they don't get a full retirement as somebody does at 20 years, which I understand, but they still do 20 years in one way or another. Sometimes they do 30 years, and they don't, their retirement is still not going to be as much as someone that served 20.
That's actually an interesting point. I think revamping it, because when it comes to veterans benefits, I don't think they get revisited a lot. And I know that I'm sure that there's committees in Congress, and I know the VFW lobbies to Congress, but that's actually an interesting one with guys who do like 30 years in the National Guard, where sure, it was only 1 weekend a month. Maybe they got a couple deployments, they had gone on ship, or any opportunities they've got for extended training. But even if there was even if there necessarily wasn't, and this is just me giving possibly my future congressman some ideas, but like if for those National Guardsmen, if there was some sort of either tax incentives,
Mhm.
like with when it comes to possibly their property tax, which hopefully can go away in Texas soon, because I saw that was on the primary ballot as well, or stuff in regards to the sales tax, that maybe that those veterans don't have to pay, some way to, at least it would be a kickback, as opposed to to change. Like there's ways, I think, that to better serve it, and it's great that you have that foresight, that's top of your mind as something going in there to Congress to help better serve veterans. I mean, there's a lot in Texas. Texas probably has the most
Oh yeah.
veterans of any other state, next to, I'm sure, Florida, New York, and California are up there, but I know Texas itself, especially with their National Guard, probably has a lot of people who should be incentivized to start businesses and get jobs, and also pursue staying in the Texas National Guard as a career. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So we've got budget, borders up there. Um, yeah, military, the defense spending is a little bit cut, helping out veterans. I do want to mention the border is something that, yeah, a lot of people listening to the show are very tuned in on. I had gone down to Eagle Pass a few weeks ago, and what's crazy about the border is I don't think people see. We're not seeing the, like, people, like what's currently happening is being seen in communities across America with different levels of crime, for sure. But at the same time, I don't think people realize how close to home it really is, and how much of a problem it can become. And it has nothing to do. And the thing is what's tough about the border, and what I don't like, is about how it's been made political by the current administration, because it's not political. It's as simple as it's a humanitarian and a national security crisis. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, if we took 100,000 Americans, and we just started, or say 100,000 Americans per day started moving to Russia, what
Hmm.
what would Russia's response be? What if 100,000 Americans, and all these Americans were apparently saying, and I'm just saying, I'm just spitballing here, going off like Twitter, say a bunch of very progressives or something, so a very extreme, far left or far right people were saying, I'm seeking political asylum from the United States, and it was 100,000 per day going into Russia. What's Russia going to do? Or likewise, if they were going into India or Japan or Pakistan, if they were going into any country, if so many people per day were by the thousands kept going in, crossing in illegally, what would any other country do besides look at it as this is a humanitarian and national security crisis? And I think it's just like you mentioned how important the border is, and it's not political. It's a sad scenario, but it's also a Trojan horse at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, that the cover of the border, I always say it's kind of like a smoke screen of something bigger that's going on in the world. I mean, there's other things that are going on all throughout the world, but we're focusing on the border. And not only that, like our border is open. There's no other way to say it. I mean, it is open when you can just come across and be processed and then set free to roam throughout the United States. But you do bring up a good point. Like if we were to, let's just say, for instance, instead of just processing them, we move them and we, let them allow them to travel all the way up to Canada. What would Canada do? Do we think Canada would accept them in with open arms and, just come in and give them all the funds and place to stay like we are here in the United States? It's like they wouldn't do that. But if we were to like not accept them, then we'd be considered here in the United States of so inhumane against humanitarian, or these we're inhumane to all these people seeking asylum. But they haven't made a claim, like a legitimate claim to asylum, other than they're not living as well as they'd like to in their own country. I mean, that's go on.
No, I was going to say, and I'm curious. I didn't know. I had spoken to a gentleman in the Texas National Guard who had been down, who has worked with Operation Lone Star, and he explained to me about the situation with especially the young kids and how and the amount of trafficking going on, and essentially a lot of the young kids themselves are not with. And there's another person. I mean, his name's Andrew Callaghan. He runs this show called Channel 5 News. I mean, a lot of these, it's pretty well known that these families are being posed. They're
Mm-hmm.
split up. They're put with different families and stuff like that. And essentially, this gentleman in the Texas National Guard, had explained to me is that when even they do catch a coyote, the coyote is a middleman, and he'll never give anybody up. And if he happens to finally give somebody up, the guy he gives up is just another middleman, and they can't really get down because the entire border is run by crime syndicates
Yeah.
that you can't, that there is no negotiating with. And so the idea of us, not being us being inhumane is just completely wild. And I was curious only because I had this conversation. He's an officer in the Texas National Guard. Met him at a gym I used to go to. I'm just wondering if you had any, you're looking to represent the 35th. The National Guard's currently there. And I know that maybe it's a little out of your wheelhouse, but do you have any connections with what's been going on with Operation Lone Star at all?
Yeah, I had a few buddies that were on that Operation Lone Star, and some of they tell me the same thing. They'd go in there, they're saving people that are drowning in the river, and just like you said, they're coming across with the kids, and you don't even know if they're the kid that they're even related. They just say they are, but there's no proof, and I think now they don't even want to provide proof that that person that kid is with that person is like a relative of some sort. But that is like, yeah, it's an extremely unfortunate situation that we allowed to happen, because that's exactly what happened. We allowed it to happen. And that, like, if and I just hate the fact with the current administration blaming Congress, saying it's Congress's fault because they're not willing to pass anything. And I read that bill. That bill it's not very good. It was not written to secure the border or help out in the immigration process. I mean, I've heard it said you can just secure the border with one piece of paper saying to secure the border. Just make it illegal for any if you to cross. If you don't cross at a port of entry, then you're crossing illegally. That's how we label. This is how we're going to secure the border. They come across illegally, we just immediately deport them right back. Of course, after we process them, that's the process portion should just be process and return, and just keep track of them that way. And but at the same time, I'm like, hey, I understand your situation. If you're coming over here legally, we catch you, we process you, we say, hey, you want to come back, this is how you legally come over here. This is what you have to do. And then we send them back to their country of origin and have them try to work their way through that way. But like I said, it's a crime syndicate down there, and it's being ran, but we all know it's being ran by the cartel, and they got their hands in everything over there. It's not just the human trafficking that they got their hands on, but they got their hands on legitimate businesses down there too. And if we know about it here in Congress or in the United States, if we know about it, why aren't we doing anything about it? Like, why are we allowing them to hold their legitimate businesses and their illegal businesses at the same time and run them in tandem? And I'm sure I'm not there yet, but if I were there and if I could see this, and I know I know what businesses that are running under the cover of legitimate businesses but doing illegal activities, I mean, we need to shut that down. I mean, that so we don't get an avocado. I mean, we got to figure it out, but it's out there.
No, you're absolutely right, and I know we're running on time, but I definitely want to touch on it or kind of dive into transportation a little bit. Now, what's crazy about the border too, because I've spent a lot of time down in Laredo, and there's a big checkpoint at mile marker
Mhm.
30, which maybe you've driven down there, and it talks about the number of CDLs that have been revoked. And I know in 2020 when I was driving, it was just over the 600s, and as of now, I saw on Twitter yesterday, it's inching closer to 900. The last time I was there, I was down there April of last year. It was over 800. Now it's inching closer to 900, and that's just what's being caught, and that's with illegal drugs, and that's with illegal aliens and drugs. Now, when it comes to, and this is what I mean, especially when it comes to what a great job you can do with Congress right here, especially with talking with Mexico, because what's happening soon in transportation with Laredo set to really have a lot of great economic growth in the next few years with the expansion of the World Trade Bridge. There's 4 new bridges being built, and I know that this is something Senator Ted Cruz has worked
Mhm.
very hard on, because Mexico is going to have a lot of nearshoring because of when President Trump had revamped NAFTA. There's a lot of manufacturing that's coming to Mexico. And in reality, there's a very good life for people
Oh
who
yeah.
are coming to Mexico. And I don't think people are really also realizing that. Like, do I think America's the greatest country in the world? Sure. But we don't pick, the cosmos picks where we're born. And I think at the same time, there's a lot of good opportunity coming into Mexico. And I definitely just want to part there. But kind of segueing into it, you've worked in logistics. There's a lot, there is a transportation, there is a House Transportation Committee, which I know Congressman Allred, who's running against Senator Ted Cruz, is in. He's in that committee. Well, on the Senate side of things, but in the House Transportation Committee, that's something that could be your wheelhouse. And that I know that is there anything supply chain wise, transportation wise, that you want to hone in? I know there's a lot of issues in the country that have to do with parking. We were talking before the show. I was telling you our area is going to
Mhm.
be is going to become hell on earth when it comes to truck parking. There's a lot of pay when it comes to there's a lot of issues when it comes to pay and retention in the trucking industry. Really, one of the biggest threats to the industry. There's always talk about a lot of safety that goes on, and especially with the implementation of autonomous. I was curious of kind of gaining your opinion on how you feel about AI kind of entering the industry, and or anything going on in the transportation world you're looking to take to DC. And if I'm catching you off guard or anything, or
No,
this is
no.
anything outside your wheelhouse, that's fine. But
I like to run it unscripted, and if it's something that I had no idea or never thought about before, I would say. But I would say, like, as when you mentioned Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, and the building of the international bridge down there, because before they made that announcement, I was having the ideas like, instead of expanding before they announced it, I was like, before instead of expanding these bridges that are already set, I was like, we need to make more bridges, like a separate bridge just for the trucking industry, and then we could have a holding yard on either side of the border as they come across. So that way, it streamlines the transportation the part of it. So that way, they can sit in a holding yard. They have their own inspections, and it's going to be more. You have the experience. You don't have to be going between civilian side or the pedestrian traffic versus the commercial traffic, and then it would just lead right back in. But if it had its own separate, instead of expanding existing infrastructure, just build an entire new one. Utilize the infrastructure that's there, build a new one just for commerce, and then you can work on adjusting the existing one that we had there. So that was one of them. The other one too would be like why we have the space and the openness of, like, for instance, between San Antonio and El Paso. Why we have that? We should, like, go ahead and make the roads more streamlined for the trucking industry, and like and lay map out those places for their parking and for the rest areas and inspections if needed, and maintenance areas along the way, just for the trucking industry. I see it more as it'd be more beneficial for them to have their own toll road in the city than for the cars to have a toll road in the city. That way, they don't have to. worry about the traffic, because I know, because I've seen too, because I've driven the city, that they don't respect these big trucks running through the city, and they don't give them the right of way, and they don't allow them to cross into traffic when they need to. So I've seen it, and I know it, but there is a lot that can be done. And as far as like AI goes, I think along the lines of blockchaining and RFIDs, how we can actually track the movement of the trucks and where they're going. But that is a lot more to look into that, rather than to speak more on it today.
Yeah, so it's a it's no, that's actually a good, like, I appreciate that answer more of saying the because what's the real issue is there's people in Congress who are probably bought and paid for by robotics, autonomous industries, because a lot of autonomous stuff is linked to China.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what takes. The only one that I know of that isn't, that seems more similar, and maybe you've even heard it, is Torque Robotics. They actually they are a project that stems from the DoD, and they work with Daimler a lot, which and Daimler owns Freightliner. So
Yeah.
I mean, like, but for the most part, like companies like Aurora and Kodiak, Aurora being an Austin company, these are companies that are linked to China. And I think that what's tough, I guess, when it comes to representatives in Congress now, and it's just a heads up before you get to DC, is that a lot of the people who are either pushing it or wanting it are people who don't, who you just said, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to hold off, I need to do more research on this. There's other people who aren't kind of making that decision, and if anything, that's probably the best answer you can give the people of the 35th when it comes to that issue. I know when it comes to Texas specifically, what is crazy is that Texas is a huge battlefield for the autonomous because of the size of the economy
Mm-hmm.
and because of the size of the state. Is that all the companies want to be here because they have so much land
Yeah.
they can test it on, and so that's why a lot of those tech companies have poured into places like Austin, and that's what's made it such a hot topic, I guess, in the realm of Texas politics. But hey, man, we've been running for a bit. I'll tell you what, I've really enjoyed talking with you. But is there anything else you want to leave us with? You're kind of like, this is your chance. You get on that soapbox, like, hey, man, come out for Michael Rodriguez. Let's save the 35th. The floor is
You,
yours.
you said it right there. I mean, come out. I mean, the best way, like I always say, this is the election before the election. The real election is in November, and that is the real the real focus that I have right now is getting to have that opportunity to run face to face and debate the issues with the Congressman Kassar that he's right now, and all the things that he's trying to push. I think right now he's trying to push us moving Texas to the grid, to the national grid. I mean, if we're not on national grid, we're not for the national grid for a reason. And I mean, he wants to push that. I read his bill too, and it spends a lot more money than it says that he's going to save a lot more money. So I mean, that's what I really want to get to. And in order for me to get there, I have to get there. So, and the primaries doesn't get a lot of traction from a lot of voters because they don't want to be affiliated or associated with one party or another. But and then at the same time, this is the opportunity to choose the candidate that can go against the other candidate, or the incumbent at this case, in this case, to go against the incumbent. And that way you can measure them up right there. We're going to be side by side. It's going to be one-on-one. It's going to be Rodriguez Kassar. And you're going to be like, okay, who is the best that's going to represent us? Who is the best that's going to have that opportunity to represent the district and the country at the same time? And who has the experience and who has the knowledge that can get through and not think what other people are telling them to think, and that's going to be able to have that thought and help and solve the solutions, for everyone in the district, being to the youngest to the oldest. And because we're at some point in our lives, we're gonna need somebody to stand up for us. And when they speak, and I want people to have that confidence. When I say I'm going to do something, I want them to know that, okay, if he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it, because that is how I lived my entire career. in the military. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and I will. And I mean, I'll follow through on it. I need help for people to help me follow through on it. But in the end, I am going to follow through for the people.
No, that's good, man. That's really well said. I want to thank you enough for coming on. I'd love to, number one, I'd love to stay in regular contact. It'd be great to link up and have some more conversations face to face. I'd love to also connect you with some friends of mine, within the industry too, because you seem, no matter what, you seem very committed. I know we talked before the show that you seem very committed in continuing education with, all things related to the supply chain world. I think whether it's serving and whether you're serving the 35th in Congress, I think you're the type of guy who needs to hang around the political wheelhouse, but also there's a lot of there's a lot of, I'll tell you what, if I was, depending on where I was working for, I mean, there are a lot of companies, there's a lot of people in this industry who'd probably could benefit from your overall experience with doing everything from intermodal train traffic in Europe and stuff like that. You got a hell of a resume, and I appreciate your time tonight. But any other than that, where can the people find you?
So I got my website. You can look me up at rodriguezforcongress.org and email me at email@rodriguezforcongress.info. So I like to take in questions. I especially love to hear suggestions. Because when it comes down to it, the grassroots of it is, this is me representing the people, and whatever the suggestions they bring forward is things that I can add to my tool bag of experience and responsibilities, and I can push those issues forward. And that's what I really like to hear. So I mean, I really love for people to email me and just tell me that, hey, I suggest, have you looked into this, or I suggest this. We should move forward to this, because when it comes down to like the issues that I bring up to solutions, they're not just for me alone.
Awesome. Perfect, man. Well, yeah, hang out real quick. I'm going to walk us out of the show. I want to thank you enough for your time, and I'll make sure I leave your contact info in the show notes. But
Awesome. Thank you.
no, thank you for having me on. We're going to walk this one out. Thank you all for tuning in, especially the live viewers. Awesome conversation with just an awesome person. Somebody who wants to solve problems. How many times have we said that on this show? That's the reason why I'm continuing to do this show, is because we know the problems. We know they exist. We don't have all the answers, because if we did, the problems would be gone, right? And so that's what we're doing, is having the conversation to fix them. Michael Rodriguez is somebody I believe truly that wants to solve a problem. And in this, toxic political world we're in, where, everybody bases that, everybody's, people keep, and this is a quote right from that HBO show, The Newsroom, like identifying people with who they voted for in the last election. If you just listen to what Mr. Rodriguez is saying at face value for what he wants to do for the people of the 35th district, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, whatever you like to, whatever box or echo chamber you've cornered yourself in, hard to argue a guy who just wants to work for the district that he grew up in, who wants to make sure that the border's safe and secure, who wants to make sure veterans are taken care of. He seems to be going up there with a good heart of a U.S. veteran who spent many years not only serving overseas, but he served here in Texas during one of the most crucial times, in any of our lifetimes, given, the COVID-19 pandemic, which was crazy. So he's on the ground helping in that response. Can't throw more support behind this guy enough. Really appreciate him coming on the show. You guys know where to find him. I will leave it in the show notes. A lot more to come, a lot more episodes to come, a lot more just fun trucker drama coming our way. But with that, we're taking it back to the bench, team. Take care.